Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be going over my 1997 Nissan Maxima. This is something that I've been wanting to do for some time. Additionally, I receive a number of comments and questions regarding this vehicle. So I'll go over the maintenance items, the repair items that I had to make, so on and so forth. It's a beautiful day, so let's go for a drive. So I am not the original owner of this vehicle. This vehicle was purchased brand new by a close family friend, and at the time I remember I was in high school and he handed me the keys and he said, just go for a ride, and when you get on the freeway just put your foot into it. And when I got on the freeway, I just nailed it, and the acceleration was terrific. That's one thing I remember. It was like one of the very first things that really stuck out to me in this vehicle was the motor. When this vehicle first came out, the 4th generation Maxima in 1995, it was voted as one of the best motors in 95 and in 1996, I believe Motor Trend, also in other publications. Just the motor is fantastic. It's very smooth, 190 horse, 205 pound-feet of torque. And again, it's just, even after 20 years, there's no vibration. In park or neutral, you don't feel any vibration whatsoever. It's a very, very nice power plant. It's very reliable. Some people complain that it's a little difficult to work on. It's a little bit more challenging, I would say, compared to your inline 4-cylinder or inline 6 maybe, but it's not a horrible or really tough motor to work on. We have a number of repair videos on this vehicle anyway, but it's a terrific, terrific power plant. That being said, the original owner had the vehicle for roughly 10 years, and then he passed it down to his son. And his son used it as a train station vehicle. In other words, to get it back and forth from the train station. And he had it for, gosh, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years, something like that. Then he started to have some problems. He stated that the car was really hard to start, and then one day it just wouldn't start at all. He called me up and he asked, would you like the car? Otherwise, I'll donate it. It was almost like an early Christmas gift. I said, absolutely, I'll take the car. And I had the car towed back to my place. And it did need a few things, not a lot, but it did need a starter. The starter was completely shot, it burnt out. It needed a crank or a cam sensor, one or the other. The rear calipers were frozen, so I replaced the rear calipers. The front calipers, I believe, are still original. It needed an alternator. The voltage was a little low, and it was maybe pushing, I think it was around something like 11 volts with all the accessories running, the heater, the lights, everything else. That's how you quickly test an alternator. You just turn on all the electronics and test the voltage, and usually you're in the 12 to 14 volt range, you're okay, but this was like 10 or 11. So I replaced the alternator, just got it up to running, or got it up to a point so it was reliable, because I drive roughly 70 miles a day, and this is still my daily driver, just to and back from work. So I needed to get it to a point where it was dead reliable, and I got it to that point, and ever since then I've been using this thing every day. I don't keep it garaged. It does sit outside. Nevertheless, I try to keep on top of it the best that I can. We do have a number of repair videos on this vehicle, but many of them are just from viewers asking, can you show how to replace a certain sensor? Or can you go through the steps to replace such and such? And I go through those steps, even though on this specific vehicle, the sensor is perfectly fine. So what have I replaced on this vehicle? Well, really not a lot. A lot of the things have really been more maintenance items than replacement items. So I'll quickly go through the list. The front struts have been replaced. They were the original struts, and they were starting to really badly rust up. Because they were rusty, I went ahead, did the due diligence, and just replaced the front struts, got that out of the way. Regarding the rear struts, interestingly enough, I was coming home from work, and I still remember I had these brand new tires. I had 200 miles on them maybe. And I went over this massive bump on the highway, put a bubble in my tire, but it also sheared off the bottom of the strut, completely sheared it off. So I had no choice. I had to replace the rear struts right away. And I happen to run Monroe struts. A lot of guys also run KYB, which are perfectly fine. But in this case, I have Monroe. Zero complaints on the Monroe struts. One thing to note, if you're not too familiar with struts, that's essentially your shock, the whole unit. and they're quite easy to replace. And the only reason I say that is years ago what most guys did is they would remove the strut, and then you would have to get a compressor tool, compress the spring, and then transfer the spring over from the old strut to the new one. Today you can buy the complete units, and Monroe is one, KYB is the other biggie for this vehicle. It makes the job extremely easy. You just take out the old one and put in the new one. If you have a buddy helping you, it's a big plus. But nevertheless, I replaced all 4 struts. And of course the maintenance items, you know, always change the oil every 3,000 to 4,000 miles. That's usually when I tend to change it, even maybe 5,000 miles if the oil is really clean. I did replace the training fluid, of course. Again, the alternator was replaced. The power steering pump was starting to leak, so I replaced that. The other option regarding the power steering pump is you can get a gasket kit. So you remove the old pump and replace all the gaskets, but that's a lot more work because you have to open up the power steering pump itself. I just replaced the pump, the whole pump itself, and that's it. The other thing to note on these vehicles is the high pressure hose coming from the power steering pump. They are known to leak as well. So just keep an eye on them. They're pretty pricey, but nevertheless, just if you have a leak, it's either probably the power steering pump somewhere or the high pressure hose. But if you want a guide, we do have a video on how to replace the power steering pump. Exhaust is still original. When I got the car, they just put a rear exhaust on it, I believe from the cat back. But just recently, it's starting to create there's a little hole from where the muffler meets the rear exhaust. So I do have the new pipe. I just have to get the muffler now, and then I'll put that new pipe on because it's just going to get worse, especially with the winter, maybe 10 weeks away. So I will have that done pretty soon. The oil pressure sensor, that is known to leak on these vehicles. It's not an expensive sensor. We do have a video on how to replace it, but they are known to leak, so we replaced that as well. The brakes, of course, I've changed everything. So new pads all the way around, new rotors all the way around. The front calipers, again, are still original, just the rear calipers froze up. So we did the due diligence and of course replaced the rear calipers as well. Another thing I had to do was the rear valve cover gasket. That was one of the first things, or one of the first videos I ever posted on YouTube. It's an old camera, so it's non-HD. Maybe I'll reshoot it in HD, but it's pretty labor intensive, but nevertheless, it was leaking, so we took care of the rear valve cover gasket. But other than that, it's been almost bulletproof, the mechanicals on this vehicle. The transmission has worked flawlessly. I did replace the fluid again when I first got the car, but it shifts perfectly. Now, coming to the interior, the amazing thing is that everything works. The power windows, the power locks, the heated seats, everything works on this vehicle. All the gauges, the wiper controls, everything. The only downside, or the only thing we ever had a problem with, was with the radio. This had the stock Bose radio. And whenever I would go over a bump, I would lose one side, and then I go over another bump, and I lose the other side, and it would ping pong back and forth. And I said, the hell with it, I'm just going to get another radio. So option 1 is to get a used Bose unit and just replace it. Option 2 is to go with an aftermarket unit. And the interesting thing is the aftermarket unit was cheaper. So obviously I went with an aftermarket radio, which also has Bluetooth. You can listen to Amazon Music, you can listen to Pandora. It's just a lot more updated. USB port. So that's obviously the way I went. I do have a repair video on how to do that if you are curious or you have this vehicle. But other than that, everything has worked perfectly fine interior wise. Now regarding the body, that's a completely different story. And after 20 seasons of just going through really nasty, harsh winter, salt weather, it's taken a toll on the body. Number one, the front fender's completely rusted out. So I do have new fenders on the front, but they are primed. I still have to paint them, which I plan on doing in the next few weeks. In the rear, on the bottom quarter panels, right behind the rear tires, they have holes. So I do have to cut out the bad metal, get new metal, blend it in, so on and so forth. That, again, I plan on doing pretty soon, because winter's going to be here in probably 8 to 10 weeks. So that will be done very, very soon. The chassis also is pretty darn rusted. I do brush off the rust with a metal brush. Just take it off the best I can. The best thing you could do after a winter season, and this is something a lot of car manufacturers recommend, is just grab a hose and clean off the bottom. Wash all the salt off. Just grab a garden hose, wash out all of that salt, because it eats away at the metal, obviously. One other thing to note, if you do have these 4th generation Maximas or an Infiniti i30, is there's a support beam of where the lower radiator sits. That support beam is known to rust out. On this vehicle, it's still okay, but it does have a significant amount of rust. And it gets to a point where there's just so much rust, it becomes a safety issue, because now the metal is so beyond its point of doing what it needs to do. You really should have it replaced. So that being said, that's the main thing I really have to keep an eye on this car. Other than that, as long as I keep an eye on the rust, the car will keep on going. These motors are well known to go beyond 300,000 miles, so it's very, very reliable. Just do the maintenance items, you know, change the brakes, change the tires when they need to be changed, change the fuel filter, the air filter, the oil, the tranny fluid, the power steering fluid. Just do the maintenance items, and the car will last you a very, very long time. You know, after 20 years, this car still runs very, very well. But I do the maintenance items. I don't miss anything. I write everything down, the date, the miles, and then every so often I keep on top of it. And I say, oh wait, it's been 5,000 miles since I did an oil change. Let me change the oil. So, you know, just keep on top of it. And, you know, you don't have to spend a fortune on a brand new car. The downside is, yeah, the rust, you got to keep on top of it, and it's a pain. You got to paint it. You can always bring it to a body shop. The other thing is, you can always buy these parts now that are pre-painted, but you're paying a lot more money, you know. In retrospect, I probably should have done that, because again, there's the time issue of me getting the factory paint with the clear coating and everything else. It's, you know, it's just more time out there I got to put into it. So in a nutshell, that's my Maxima. That's essentially everything I've done to it. The reliability, the miles, again, about 172,000 miles, and very, very reliable car. I love these things. They're comfortable, they're quiet, they have plenty of torque. They are terrific vehicles, and especially with this year being so old and the miles, you can just run liability coverage, so you don't need collision on the insurance. You can run 87 octane. So again, it's just cheap transportation. That it's a nice vehicle to be in. You know, I like this cabin. It's a clean layout. I just like the cabin. It's a very nice place to be. So that being said, thank you for watching. We will continue to add repair videos for this vehicle. And until then, we'll see you next time.